Allison is our next speaker. There's a lot of excitement about your talk. You better show the chat bot that we all can use today. Looking forward.
All right, thank you, Javad. And as you'll see, was definitely thinking of you as we put some of this together. So let's see. Again, that is my best hair day. I'm not ever changing that profile ever again. Not so good today either. You know, it's always interesting to me to come back to this area. I actually grew up in the DMV area, and my mom was a clinical RN at Billington at NIH. She was actually one of the first part of the Taxol protocols or other things that came in there. My dad worked at the Pentagon just down the road and did big data for 3-letter agencies. And so I guess if you put those two things together, you get people who are interested in building data infrastructure for cancer. And I think it's really been interesting to see, as Rod and Adam just gave really nice introductions into the generative AI space. The other thing that happened to me recently is I came down here, and one of my former grad school lab mates, Amartya Shehu, is now the chief AI officer of George Mason University. And we got together, and it was amazing to just retrospectively think about the journey of AI, of when we were in grad school. You know, don't do AI, like that's a dead end. Like you're not going to find things. Support vector machines, machine learning. Yes, machine learning will do interesting things. This AI space, you know, don't do it. And it was interesting because for me, I went on this journey of all the methods, all the things I try to do as computer scientists. Like we did not have the data for it. So it's really interesting to reflect of like that space of we need more data versus like, oh, in the clinic, you're seeing all these data points and you can't integrate it. And how do we use these tools to do this better? And I think along those lines, we've all been riding this AI curve. And I think I say that because I often think, I can't remember what remark it is, sometimes in our own domains, we're often the most close-sighted, we're the most skeptical, right? So when this first came out, it's like, oh yeah, it's gonna be another chat pod, and like we're gonna have to talk about the AI stuff. But it's been amazing that it's a new tool in the toolkit, and you can hear it when people are talking about it in these metaphors, right? When you start talking about it, and one of the really interesting things I think is that the computers are getting good at language, right? So when we hear data and we talk about why is it so hard for us, you know, if you think about it, data has not been around very long in a lot of ways. The digital space is recent human memory. What we do have is language, thought, and it's how we want to interact. It's how we interact with each other. It's how you're judging me and how I'm communicating to you. And it suddenly is this really powerful thing. And as Rod was saying, though, is how do you leverage that and how do you use it? And so I'm going to show a little bit of a demo today of kind of iterations that we've been doing on, you know, how to make this work for CBTN. And, you know, we're not going to solve all problems across all things. We're going to focus first on what we need, what the tools and gaps that we have heard very viscerally that we need as a community, and then we're going to go from there. So we're calling this David AI Prelude. David, data analytics, visualization, insights, discovery. Adam gave an amazing talk at an AWS keynote that you all should watch if you have not seen that. And then really Prelude, this is the beginning. This is the introductory performance. We're starting to orchestrate things. We're starting to bring things together. And how do we really come together to figure out how this works? So as we've all heard this morning, I think I don't even need this slide. We've gone through this. We've seen all like fantastic science happening, wonderful things of the multimodal data, the complexities. Just it's always and I think what Sarah said resonate. I really love saying I don't know. Like tell me more. Tell me more about single cell sequencing. I want to know. Like I'm not going to be an expert, but I don't know that. And I think the other thing that's really happened with AI and some of these things is I don't know. I am no longer that computer science grad student embedded thinking about that. I am also there to say, how do we empower people to do this? How do we create these frameworks? And how do we take the human complexity in our networks and apply that to these complex problems? And this is not to call you out too much, Javad, but I've heard this from many people. Which portal? Why is there so many? Like, can't we just have a central front door to all this? Why can't I just ask the question? Why do I have to talk to a whole team of analysts to get what I want? Wait, what's Cavatica? What's PC BioPortal? So again, we have training sessions, we have education sessions, but we're all so busy. Like, I'm not going to learn how to do any of the cool science I heard this morning, I shouldn't expect people to be able to log in and do SQL statements on data. And so how do we do that? Human networks, we do it with language. AI is starting to allow us to do it with language too. And the other interesting thing is, unlike most humans, although I think there are, we need to think about who are the right roles of this. As again, thinking kind of science fiction, other things. One of my favorite movies as a kid was Short Circuit. And there's this one place where he goes in and he's looking at the books and he starts flipping through it and he's like, I need more input. And that's really where the space is at. Like it needs more input, but not just the data, it needs input from people and users. And so in a lot of ways, we talk a lot about data being AI ready, and CBTN data is super AI ready. We have data sharing, we have data governance, and we have a hardworking team of folks across the clinical data working group, folks at D3B, different collaborations across the federal space, as you heard. We've really started getting the data management practices under control. It is hard. It is hard when it's multimodal. It's hard when it's multi-institutional. It's hard when you're trying to serve a lot of different scientific questions. But it's really pushed us to think about the standards, the frameworks, and the way we do this, and the right teams of people to come together. So the other aspect, I think, is making the AI ready for CBTN. Okay, so like as Rod was showing, we can't just go to ChatGPT and ask questions about what is in OpenPCAN or what mutations are. So in April 2024, and I think this is really where me personally, I think went from, okay, I'm skeptical about this. I can kind of do ChatGPT and that's great, that's good, but actually I can just go to the computer and ask it to do it for myself. To like, okay, there's really something here. So the AWS team came to CHOP in April. And we did a really rapid, don't read what's on here. I was trying to find a good picture and I couldn't. A really rapid, sorry, I wasn't sure how close I need to be to the mic. A really, a 2-day kind of really rapid whirlwind of how quickly can we stand up an AI to really start answering questions. And I'll say Min-Kul Chim and Ching from AWS were really the two technical people that got together. But what was important, and it was funny because I think you could feel the sense of like, well, everyone else is just sitting here. But it turned out having everyone in that room, Ariana was there. We had other people asking about questions and things. Having that input of like, oh, what are you trying to ask? What would you try to ask? That's really what enabled it. And you can feel at the end, like as soon as it started answering a few things, you can be like, oh yeah, like I can see that. That's almost there. It's not quite right. And so to get ready for today, I think I have spent basically the last 72 hours in the AI like depths of just like talking to these things. And you can start seeing why you start, coming to it, because the sensation, and I don't know if anyone has ever done this in like school or retreat where there's like a teacher and she has bread and peanut butter and jelly. She's like, hey, tell me how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. And the kids will be like, okay, you put the peanut butter on the bread. And so she'll take the jar of peanut butter and like put it on the piece of like the loaf of bread. And it's like, no, you need to get the knife. And that's how it feels. But then it starts clicking, right? But it starts clicking, and I'll show you a little bit to your own knowledge. It mirrors and reflects back to you what you know, but then it starts being able to integrate the data and provide answers that you want. And I think I'm starting to get into the Hive space a little bit more, but I'm hoping as we go through the demo, you can see some of the potential here. Yeah, we had the clinical, I think Caitlin was there. It was a really great experience. We got to ring cowbells and we got things done. That was always a fun little bit. So this is the interface that you see. If you're like me, I'm happy when I have buttons to click on, and I don't actually know what to say, but maybe what information is in CBTN. And this is it's going through a different architecture that I'll show you a little bit later. And it takes a little while, right? It's thinking about it. It's doing all these kind of calculations. It's hitting the LLM model in the back end. But at the same time, this has been one that we have developed. We have full control over this. This is in an AWS environment, and it comes back and it tells you what we've told it and informed it. We have 3 different tables: CBTN all, specimens, experimental assays, and that's great. But what do you think is CBTN's greatest asset? It's going to think about it a little bit, not too hard. Our greatest asset is our patients and our partnership, right? And so, we can develop this, we can train it and educate it. Of course, it makes sense. So how many patients in CBTN have medulloblastoma? And I have to say, I did not coordinate with Sarah or anybody else when I was doing this. This was like 11 p.m. at night, trying to think through what would be an interesting questions to set. Based on the query, there's 643 patients in the CBTN database diagnosed with medulloblastoma. What medulla subtypes are in CBTN? It's going back, it's querying the database. I actually say that it's often, I'm surprised at how many emails we get of like, oh, do you have the subtypes for medullo? Yes, we do. But it's interesting because it also will tell you some of the gaps in the data. There's lots of gaps here. There's ways to fill it. And you have the ones that you would expect. And it also is telling you at this point where it's going. So you know exactly what tables it's going, what data it's getting. And so for the sonic hedgehog subtype, this is me thinking, how many patients have progression or recurrence? And I don't know. And I was actually very surprised as I was going through this. It's going back. This is going back. The generative part of this is it's generating the SQL, it's generating the back-end queries to say there's 7 patients in the CBTN diagnosed. And so take those 3 different steps. You can see the SQL. And I went to our team and said, it can't only be 7. There's got to be more than 7. There's actually only 7. Yeah, and we just have to see that it is a gene. Yes, it is not the video game. And I love that we live in a world where genes are named after. All right, and this is why I want to do it live, because I wanted that discussion. This is great. But okay, so we have these 7 patients. What's almost the next question? For these patients, could you give me a table of the clinical data with IDs, diagnosis, subtype? Hey, what about treatment? I'm always interested in the treatment and survival. And this is doing the same thing. You can just, and I asked it many different times. The most interesting thing I don't have time to show here is those kind of iterations of, oh, just show me a table. And it's like, here, I think this is what you want. And, it was missing the subtype. And I was like, oh, of course I want the subtype. But you can do that here. You can iterate through. You don't have to know your perfect question here. You can start with that. You can see the table and say, oh, I want those columns also. And so this is going back. Again, it's creating the query. And for anyone who's had delivery of CBTN data, this will look very familiar. So open PCAN molecular subtype, surgery, chemotherapy, survival. And the next question is, how can I view the genomic data for these patients, right? So I didn't even have to ask, do you have genomic data? You could ask that, you could talk to it. And then this is going back and, instead of having to know and train on, clicking who knows how many different times to get it there. And again, I'm playing this in real time. Like, this is not fast forwarded. This is what I was hoping to do live. And here we have a table. We have the IDs, so you don't have to think about the IDs. And you have the links directly to the patients in PHC Bioportal. So you can land on there, see all the patient information. You can see that indeed it is a medullo sonic hedgehog subtype. You have all the different mutations, structural variants, copper number alterations, and you're right there looking at that patient that you're interested in. And then additionally, as we integrate these things, we have the imaging data. So you have a link right there to Flywheel. You can go in, you can see the different MRI information and kind of start navigating that different data pieces. And as it's thinking about it, it's amazing, like what computers are good at, this ID mapping stuff. What humans aren't so good at, including myself or others, is getting that. And so, yeah, my next frontier is to continue expanding the knowledge, capabilities to better assist researchers exploring the rich CBTN data set. And it ends. So, and I really had hoped to do it live, because really the next thing is to sit down and just talk to it, which is crazy for me to say, but it really is pretty compelling. And like I said, myself, is Mean in the room, or Ching? There's Mean and Ching. These two guys have really done an amazing job putting this together. And then also a special shout out to Adam, who has infinite patience to talk. And I will say that that is an important phenotype, I think, to actually building these tools. And for the first time in a long time, this is really when I myself was not very involved in building it. I really am the initial beta user of it, and I'd say it's a privilege, right? that to really be the person who can test it and see it, and not see all the flaws, but the potential of it has been really amazing. Yes, and Chris Blackton and Alex Lubnowski, who are the ones who created a lot of the cloud infrastructure in the back end to do this, who can also evidently help me with the. Yes, awesome. Just their presence, Chris, made the computer work. And, but I think the thing is a lot of times, it seems like you hear a lot, oh, AI is a black box. It's what's really interesting, I think, as a, kind of computer person, I guess, I will bin myself in that place, is it's not actually black magic. These are tools that you can build on. These are tools that we can put in. We have this all within our own environment. It's not, going out into the wild. And you really can start piecing together these different aspects of what LLMs really do. I really think of them as they understand language, right? But then you need to layer on the different data pieces. What data should you need to bring in? What questions do you want to ask? And really start refining. And I think the other thing, and if AI does nothing else, even if it doesn't solve our problems, as a data infrastructure person, it finally gives us a chance to say, this is why the data is important. If all it does is help us get better, highly quality curated data and helps us get our better real-time data streams, I think the other interesting observation is that what AI needs from data is actually no different than what humans need from data. It can just do it faster and quicker and more. And so if we do that, I think there's a part of me that's even if the generative AI stuff does not pan out and it helps us get the infrastructure that we need the data for, we know we need that for our tools and other things. And what the AI and those interfaces allow us to do is instead of having to always translate, through someone who can then ask the computer a question and then send an email back and talk to you, it really starts allowing all of us to participate into building that knowledge base, building these tools that we need, and actually answering the questions from the data in an accurate and reliable way. So I really do view that this has gone from impossible to possible, and it's a big step. It is a big change. There is, with any hype curve, there is always something of huge value that's happening there. It's never as great as you think it is, but then you have to ask yourself, when I apply this to the problems I have, and I think this thing is, and I think, I don't know if Vincent is still here, but Vincent and I have built a number of systems over the years. And as you heard in his talk, we have this shared phenotype of when something's amazing, we always know there's a lot of hard work to do and that we should keep working hard at it. And so I think that's one of the things that, as Vincent was setting up, we know these portals are great. We know we've created these great IAs, but there's so much more to do. And linking these portals and tools with the AI, linking that with the different clinical data workflows, figuring that out is a lot. And it spans engineering, it spans basic research, it spans clinical, it spans operations. And, I can put a couple technical next steps on here that we know we need to do. But even if this was the most performant thing, who cares if it doesn't answer our questions? If we have great prompt engineering, it gives you lots of recommendations for your, the best restaurants in Crystal City. Who cares if that doesn't help CBTN? We have to figure out how, as a community, we really engage and work on these things. And the last thing I'll say is I think that's really the takeaway. And I'm really eager to understand, what if? What if I could ask this? Javid, please keep asking those questions. What if we could combine this with adult data? What if we could, ask this to, what's the most important thing that it could do for you in this arena? And it's interesting because I put the screenshot in. I don't know if everyone probably can't read it. But this is me trying to teach it how to do PC bioportal links. And this is where I had this moment of I know how to do this, and I'm telling this AI how to do this. That's not what this AI needs. It needs to do this, but it needs to figure it out once, and then it can give you that table. It can figure that out. How do we get everyone in here who knows so much more about the different mechanisms, the different biological questions, the different clinical care? How do we get that really engaged? And then the things that we can figure out is like, okay, what if that is really the learning part? What if that is engineering that we need to do in the back end? How do we really move this forward? All right, so I will end on the slide that has a lot of people on it, and I'm sure there's more here. As point out, Ming and Ching have really been technical folks. Neil and Alex on the DevOps team have done a lot of work in this way. And there's a whole number of people. And I think one of the great things about doing this project is really thinking, I heard this morning talking about the different clinical expertise and that data also has different expertise. No matter how much Ariana tells me, like, I have 1.2 million files, until we actually try to push those 1.2 million files through the system and get that out to the users, we don't know. Until, I think Jan Kuhn is somewhere around here as well, until it's like, okay, we need to figure out how we do long read pipelines, perform it more expert. And we have all these different expertise, and then we have a lot of people who are some of the translators between these different domains. And that's also what we need. The other question about kind of some of the workforce questions, other things, thinking about it, we need all the expertise, but we also need people who are translating, who are saying, I don't know, tell me more. Tell me how this works. How do we engage? How do we move this forward? And giving those kinds of human interfaces also the credit that they need. So we have the CBTN team. AWS has been a fantastic partner, and I think we're going to kind of grow this engagement as well. The clinical data working group, which is now transforming into the clinical data operations core, but really I think that has been the backdrop of how do we do this? How do we even get that CBTN database in the first place for this AI to query? If we didn't have that, you couldn't do this. Like, if you didn't have the one-line reports, if we didn't have all the genomic data harmonized on PC Bioportal, none of what you saw would be possible. The AI itself is just the layer for us that starts allowing us to navigate that with language. And then, of course, the CBTN patients and family, as DAVIDai told us, is definitely always our greatest asset. So with that, I'm not sure if we have time for questions. I'm happy to take them. Everyone has my email. But I will probably redirect you to other people to answer these questions, but I'm always happy to talk about it.
Allison, that was fantastic. You absolutely deserve to drop the mic if you want. You nailed it.
I'm just going to chime in 1 second, because of oversight on my part. You heard about ARPA-H, starting. A lot of what you're seeing is pre-ARPA-H. And it's really the way we got there, and it was really through Bob and Nicole. It was the foundations and families who essentially infused funds before ARPA-H came along. So I just wanted to thank you guys for making this vision possible. Let's move forward.
I'll really echo that. This is a really example of people investing where folks thought we weren't ready, and we just keep pushing the boundaries, and now you can start seeing that we're ready. All right, and then the last thing as we transition, because I know there's a lot of the AI, and just keep in your mind as we go through the next presentation, increasing some of these partnerships of how do we get this data, how do we exchange this data. Again, the AI is, I think, the great demo. It's nothing without the data to actually feed it.